Okay, so this video starts out the same way that all great videos do, with a DM from newkiddo. Newkiddo was working on some lyrics using this song as reference for the vibe and feel. So he DM'd me and said, hypothetically, how long would it take you to make a song inspired by this song? And I said, hypothetically, this long. And he said, cool, I'll get back to you. The next day, he reached out again and said, okay, let's make that hypothetical a reality. And I said, cool, let me get started on this song. I'll use this as inspiration and send you something when I have something I'm happy with. Now on this channel, I talk about music and music related things. So music, yes, but also the feelings behind music, the thought processes, why we do things, how I feel about certain things, and all sorts of stuff. Why do we hate autotune and why you should make music that sucks? A whole bunch of stuff about music related things. So I was really testing myself because I knew this could be a really, really great video if I executed it properly. So I opened up Logic and I tried my first attempt. And it didn't really go well. I think I've said on this channel before that you can learn a lot from failing. And oh boy, did I. Okay, welcome to Logic Pro. This is my first attempt, and you can see that it's a pretty full track, or at least it looks that way. One of my tips in a video a while ago about thinking horizontally is taking a loop and just looping it over the entire session. So it's all the same stuff, it's just across time as opposed to being looped in a section. And I have newkiddo's reference track in here as well. So I started out with the drums because I knew that I wanted to have that bounce rhythm, and this is what I started with. Those were the underlying drums that I heard in the reference track, and I added some more percussion layers. So I have another hi-hat going down here. And then on top of that, there's also this like bird chirp topper. Some of these loops come default in Logic Pro, and I think they work really well in some circumstances. So I'm getting that bounce, I'm getting that feel, I have that like jig, I have that groove. So I had the rhythm, but I didn't have any tonal elements or any synths. So I added this one. It's just a retro synth on the off beats. If you listen to the reference track, it's in there buried really deep, but you can still hear it. So I added it, but I wasn't really worried about what the key was because I thought I'd just figure it out and make it sound good, but well, I didn't. One of the defining features of the reference track was those vocals that we hear throughout the entire piece that are part of like the sample that's used. You know, in the background, that like high tenor kind of voice. That thing. So I thought to myself, how could I get that effect without using the same vocal sample? So I pulled some Marvin Gaye. I'm not gonna lie, I think that sounds pretty cool. And with the rest of the instruments, it sounds like this. And I don't know if you can hear that, but I didn't quite hear that when I was putting the vocals into the song. But the vocals and the mellow brass offbeat synth that I have, I don't think are in the same key, and I didn't realize that until later. So I started adding more synths. I got this heartthrob layers from the stock Logic loops that there's some good stuff in there. But again, that synth layer and the Marvin Gaye sample I have aren't in the same key. I added another layer with these pitch correction vocal type sample-y dudes, which sound like this, and that really muddied the stuff because again, I don't think they're in the same key. That pitch correction synth layer plays a second chord that clashes with the other synth that I have going on here. There's just something off about it. But then I added bass. And gotta be honest, that bass kind of grooves. So if you put it with the kick and the drums, it kind of bounces a little bit. There's a bit more in this track, but altogether it sounds like this. Which isn't terrible, but I didn't like it, and it wasn't my best work. I think one of the things that really went wrong on my first attempt was I wasn't paying enough attention to the musical key. I've mentioned on this channel before that sometimes you have to make music that sucks so you can learn what sounds good so you can make better music next time. And in my first attempt, through my mistakes, I really learned what made this song tick. The drums, the rhythmic samples, the synth sounds, all of it. Here's a really quick music production lesson for you. In music production, there's a tool that music producers use called sidechain compression. And in a track like this, the kick is arguably the most important thing. And you really want the kick to punch through the rest of the sounds. Sidechain compression allows you to have that punch, that clarity, if you will. When you have a kick and you have a whole bunch of other sounds, sidechain compression will turn down the other sounds every time the kick hits. It improves clarity, helps reinforce your kick rhythm, and just has a really cool effect overall. What it really boils down to, if you want to put it really plainly, sidechain compression is just a set of eyes. You put a set of eyes on these sounds, and every time the kick hits, the eyes are going to blink so that the sound turns down and back up again. That's all it is. It's really helpful for improving clarity in a mix. So there I was, in the dead of night, the computer screen lighting up my face, and my first attempt a failure. And in my head, I had this voice tell me,
all one must do is look in.
So I opened up another Logic session. Now this is a big session. This is the final session with everything in it. There's a lot here. There's a lot to look at. But at the very beginning, it was an empty Logic session. My first attempt did not go well. I was feeling a little bit crushed, and there I was, once again facing an empty Logic session. I did a little bit of research on how the original sample came to be and where the song came from. And I found a YouTube video, which I'll link in the description, that showed how the sample was found and what sort of sounds were used where. Then I found a website that showed what the chord progression of the reference track was. So at the very beginning, I plotted out the chord progression, or as best as I could the chord progression, into a synthesizer here, and it sounded like this. And it's a really basic sound for a synthesizer because I was focusing on the chords rather than the sound of the synthesizer. But I liked it enough to keep it in the song. And I layered that with, what did I layer it with? And I layered that with Logic Pro's 80s FM piano. So you get a nice attack from the first synth and then some sustain with the 80s piano. So I thought that was a good starting point so I could work on the rest of the song. I used the same drum rhythm as the first attempt because, again, I'm learning from my mistakes. Not everything in the first attempt was bad. There are things that I learned in that first attempt that I'm now applying in the second attempt. And the drums sound like this. And now that I had a chord progression, I can make that offbeat sort of sampley, trumpety, offbeat, synthy, bouncy sound using the right chords. So I have this studio trumpet playing those chords. So I can have that offbeat, bouncy rhythm. So with the synths, you get this. I think one of the things while making music that's really important that I think some people might forget is also you can move while making music. You want to move while making music, especially when something is this bouncy. You want to feel that bounce in your chair. I'm moving the entire time I'm listening back to this. So now it's time for more percussion. I added a hi-hat and a tambourine, and I pitched up the tambourine by 3 semitones so I could have it like be kind of short and spiky and really get there. Then in Apple Loops, I found this arcade sounding full kit sample, and I EQ'd it so there's no low end because I want my kick to come through, and it sounds like this. So you have those weird sort of samples in there, and with everything else so far, it sounds like this. And that felt like a good place to move on to some bass. So Logic Pro is a trap bass preset that I put some saturation on and sidechained it to the kick, so it sounds like this. It's really low and gritty, and then I added a pump bass on top of that so it kind of pops as well. So altogether, it sounds like this. And that goes on for the whole song. Look at it. It goes on for the whole thing. It only pauses every now and again to give a little bit of a transition as well as a full stop so you can hear some other sound effects pop through. And then I had something that I was pretty happy with. So there I was. It was late at night and I just finished this. The computer light illuminating my face and I was stuck. And I thought to myself, what would newkiddo do? one thing was missing: Minecraft sound effects. And so I cooked. I knew in our DM conversation that he was writing a song about iceboat racing. And so I thought, hey, why not put some Minecraft sound effects in there? So all of these regions are Minecraft samples or related samples that I found in Apple Loops. There's a bit of both in here. It's mostly Minecraft, but there are some vocal glitchies and like a hoop and some other things like that sprinkled in here as well. And you get 10 cool points if you identify all of the Minecraft samples that I used. Here's a little moment where there's no Minecraft samples, just to help you out. There you go. And here's a fun music production trick that I can show you as well. For those of you keeping track at home, I did use the enchantment orb sound effect. Sounds like this. And I mapped it out onto a keyboard so you could play it and it sounds like this, which I think is a pretty cool sound effect. The last thing in my head was that I still wanted a vocal sample sound before I sent a sample to newkiddo. So in Logic Pro, there's this Finn guy who I sampled and put it onto a keyboard so I could play it, and it sounds like this. And I love that sound. Honestly, I love that sound. It sounds really cool to me. And the last thing I did was some transition sound effects, and then this is what I sent to newkiddo. The things that I kept the same in this song were the tempo and key. The tempo was key so I could maintain that bouncy rhythm that I knew newkiddo was writing to. I wouldn't want to give him something faster or slower because then his lyrics would have to be pushed or pulled in reference to the tempo. So I kept the tempo the same because I knew he was writing to something in the same tempo. That way, I could make sure that my drums and synths and other sounds have that bouncy feel that I also knew he was writing to. I kept the key the same for the same reason. I knew that he was writing a song that was in B flat major, so I kept the key the same and used almost the same chord progression, so the lyrics that he was writing and the melodies that he was singing would fit on top of the chords that I was writing. I sent newkiddo a 30-second loop of what I was working on, just to catch a vibe, just to see if I was on the right track, just to see if anything should be changed. And he said it was goated. So I sent him a track so he could send me his vocals so I could put the vocals in the track and mix them properly. He also asked for some car sound effects that are really buried in the background, as well as some other specific sound effects that only happen here and there based on the lyrics that he's singing. So for example, at the very end, he sings about a car crash and then there's that metal pipe drop sound effect. Or like when he talks about his Discord, there's the Discord notification sound effect, that kind of stuff. Anything you need, I got it. I love that sample. So I'm not going to go too in depth onto newkiddo's lead vocal because I think you can just hear it in the song and it sounds great. But there are a couple of things music production wise that I think are pretty neat in this song. So at this point, newkiddo had only sent me his lead vocal and some samples that he wanted in specific spots. So I put the samples in, but with the lead vocal on this chorusy section, I added a vocoder. And I think it sounds really cool. I don't know, and I think that sounds really cool. Alongside the vocoder, I also pitched up and down the lead vocal, so you have like an octave effect on either side, and then put an ensemble plugin on it, and it sounds like this with the vocoder. It sounds really odd, don't get me wrong, but it gives a bit of a girth, if that's the right word, to the lead vocal in this section for the chorus. So the second time that kind of chorus comes along, I thought to myself, I want to get in on the fun, and I also sung it, and I'm in the song too. And yes, some of those notes are wrong, but whatever, it's buried in the background and it sounds good anyway, so. I've done that auto-tune pitch up an octave trick a couple of times in the song, most notably in the background vocals that newkiddo sent me that are here. And after putting in a few more samples and sound effects, some mixing and mastering, you have the final song, with a grand total of 94 tracks.
Overtake that kid, overtake that kid, come on bro, overtake that kid, overtake that kid, lock in.
And one more treat for those of you who watch In the Music Live, I use this duck quack sound effect that newkiddo sent to me, and I was like, oh, sweet, I'm gonna put that in too. So it's at the very beginning and the very end, and it sounds like this. Lovely, great, 10 out of 10, amazing. And something I learned while producing and working on this song is that the more serious we take it, the funnier the song is. He could have just phoned it in and downloaded the MP3 off of YouTube and slapped his lyrics on and off we went. But I think focusing on making it good and taking it seriously made the song more funny and in the end, a better song overall. By focusing on the music production, by focusing on the lyrics, by focusing on a good vocal take and the sound effects and everything else, you get a final product that turns out really, really good and bops and slaps and is really great. That also ends up being really funny. The more serious we took it, the funnier it became, and I think that's kind of amazing. So go listen to the full song. It's linked in the description. And since you're down there, you might as well subscribe to this channel. I post my music, talk about music and music-related content, and also have music out on Spotify and a website. So you should go check it out when you're down in the description there. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again. Bye.